The ringing phone distracted me from my thoughts about World War II. My wife of 10 years was away for 2 weeks at an annual conference. Joy hates everything military, while I am a huge World War II buff. I have every war movie ever made, so to make my life easier, I only watch them when she's not there. I usually watch them when she has a bachelorette party or Saturday shopping with her friend Amanda, but twice a year she goes away for an extended period of time. In August, she has to travel to Indianapolis for 2 weeks to attend corporate meetings and training. In February, she goes for 2 weeks to the general meeting of the company. This year, the meeting was held in Houston. The meeting is special because only the top 10 workers in each state get to attend, and Joy has been going there for the past 3 years. Last year, she called me on a Sunday and told me to pack my suitcase and meet her in Miami. It turned out that she had won a prize in a drawing, and the prize was a week for 2 in Miami. Needless to say, I wasn't too disappointed after spending a week of the cold Colorado winter in sunny Florida. Every time she leaves, I watch war films. That Saturday, I watched The Dirty Dozen, Enemy at the Gates, and Saving Private Ryan. I bought sandwich meat, hoagie rolls, and a 23-gallon bucket of cheese balls. I just made a sandwich and started watching Band of Brothers. It was while the boys from Easy Company were devouring their spaghetti lunch after running up the Currahee that the telephone rang. Part of my mind cursed this intrusion into my binge. The other part hoped that he was calling Giotto to tell me that she won some trip to a warm place. Heck, at that point, I would have settled for a week in Houston where it was 12 degrees below zero at night and 30 below zero during the day. Caller ID reported that the call was from an unknown caller. I immediately realized that this was my old friend Paul. This bastard knows that I'm knee-deep in war this weekend and I'm not going anywhere. "What do you want, bastard?" To my surprise, the voice on the phone was female. I'm trying to contact Roger Rigby. The fact that the person said my name took me by surprise. Most people call me Zeke. "Roger is here. What can I do for you?" "Mr. Rigby, this is Detective Desiree Phillips of the Vale Police, and I'm calling because your wife was in an accident and is at Eagle Valley Medical Center. It's in pretty bad shape and you should probably come here as soon as possible." "I think you're wrong, Meme. My wife is in Houston for 2 weeks for her company's convention. Are you sure about this, Mr. Rigby?" "When was the last time you talked to your wife?" "Last night she called me after her meetings. I was getting ready to go to dinner with my colleagues." The woman on the phone read me the address on Joy's driver's license. This was our address. But how could Joy's driver's license be in Vail if Joy spoke to me from Houston? "Whoever was in your hospital most likely stole my wife's purse at the airport." "Can I press charges?" "Yes, you can. I'll run the victim's fingerprints to find out who she is. In the meantime, I need you to come here, check your wife's things, and sign a statement. But you need to hurry up and come here if this is your wife, sir. She needs to sign a consent form for her to be cared for." "I'll be there in a couple of hours," I said. I didn't really want to go on a wild goose chase, but I wanted to hold this woman accountable for using Joy's credit cards. I threw a few things into my bag in case I wasn't back in the morning and headed out onto the snowy highway. During the nearly 2-hour drive to Vail, I ran through a lot of questions and answers in my head. There were 2 possibilities. The first is that someone stole or found Joy's wallet and decided to go skiing. "Why would anyone ski with stolen shit in their hands?" asked my devil's advocate. "Criminals aren't the smartest assholes, so why wouldn't they take a stolen wallet with them on their skis? Do thieves ski? How the hell should I know?" So this brings us to possibility number 2. This is Joy, and she's in Vail. Why is she skiing in Vail when she should be at her convention in Houston? Perhaps she won the trip and decided to ride a few times before calling me. She beat me to it one day when I was in Miami. What if she doesn't want you in Vail? Why does she need this? Plus, she's not in Vail. She's in Houston. How would you know? I talked to her last evening. Have you heard evidence that she's in Houston? Proof? It's a dozen idiots saying y'all or a bunch of oil talkers. This is just stupid. Did she call you from her cell phone or from the hotel? She always calls from her mobile. Why pay extra for a phone call? Besides, I drove her to the airport myself. Did you see her get her boarding pass? No, I dropped her off and went to work. Did you see her board the plane? How do you know she's in Houston? Where else should she go? In Vail, obviously. Come on. Who gets on a plane at Colorado Springs Airport to fly to Houston, Texas, and then ends up in Vail, Colorado? Vail is not between Houston and Springs. Nothing yourself, Sherlock? Apparently, someone flew from Houston to Denver and took her to Vail, or she didn't get on the plane at Springs and went straight to Vail. It must be an imposter. Imposter Scooby? Are we solving mysteries here? Fuck you. Do you know what I mean? Someone stole her shit and had an accident on Vail Mountain. Why didn't Joy tell you she lost her shit? Maybe he doesn't know yet? Or confused? I'm sure she has a good reason for not telling me. So who's acting stupid now? Am I stupid because I don't think my wife is getting anything on the side? No, this is naivety. Stupidity is an attempt to justify your naivety despite the voice in your head. What evidence do I have that she is cheating? Besides the fact that she's in Vail when she should be in Houston? Yes. Has she suddenly started dieting or exercising? No. She was always in good shape. Did she buy a bunch of sexy new clothes? No. He dresses the same as always. Have you changed your hair or makeup? No, she still looks like everyone else looked in the 90s. Man, you seriously need to bring her into this age. She doesn't get funny phone calls, doesn't act mean, and has never turned me down for sex. She has no mood swings or other signs of infidelity. Making up words doesn't prove your point, but you're right. Being in Vail is the only suspicious thing. So you admit that she's not cheating? I admit that we don't know what's going on. Bye. But yes, there are cheaters in Virginia. As I began to descend from the past and look for the exit leading to Vail, I asked myself one last question. What if it's her and she's cheating behind my back? It's simple. I'll throw this crap away. There's no room in my life for an unfaithful piece of crap. That's pretty reckless, isn't it? You were married to her for 10 years. True, but Elton Rigby never prayed to women. He knew exactly how to treat a cheater. Yes, faithfully. My mom was acting strange for a while. I was only 10 years old at the time, but I understood that something was wrong with her. She spent many evenings with her girlfriends, and her father always looked worried. One afternoon, when they thought I was visiting a friend, she confessed to him that she slept with her boss. Her father kicked her out of the house, and she moved in with my grandmother for a while. We children saw her every weekend. But my father insisted that we not join in her way of life. A few months later, they settled everything, and my mother moved back, but her old life was no longer there. Dad tormented himself every time she was late at work for more than a few minutes. Eventually, he forced her to quit her job and find something else. If she went out for a night out with her friends, she had to check in. Otherwise, Dad would call whatever bar they were in and ask if she was there. I swore to myself that I would never live like this. Mom and Dad stayed together until I graduated from high school and then divorced. None of them could live like this. Dad was a first-class detective until he found out about Mom's affair. What kind of cop am I if she pulled this crap right under my nose? He asked me one evening in a drunken stupor. It didn't take long for this to affect his work. He received early retirement after he suffered a nervous breakdown. I rarely talk to my mother these days. I am sure that in many ways it was because of her that my father died. My mother killed him inside, and it just took him a while to give in. I don't want to end up like my father, letting a traitor suck the life out of me. Just don't end up like your fucking brother. 5 years ago, my brother Daniel walked into a room where his wife and her lover were having sex. He killed them while they were having sex. Several times a year I visit him in Cannon City. If he behaves well, he might get out in another 10 years. So, you don't want to be like your father, but you don't want to end up like your brother either. Is there a middle ground? Of course I have. But if she is cheating, I want to do as much with her as I can, and at the same time remain on this side of the barricades. Is anyone calling these barricades yet? I don't know. Since when did you become the euphemism police? So are you going to be like those guys in online cheating wife stories, who leave the cheating wife penniless and then ride off into the sunset a millionaire with some curvy baby who's been secretly lusting after your ass all these years? I'm sure there are a million of them. No, if everything turns out badly, I will just live my life in constant sex with my friends and girlfriends. Good girl. The closer I got to the Vail exit, the more nervous I became. Even my devil's advocate voice seemed to disappear. I almost stopped to puke before getting off I-70. Finding a hospital wasn't that difficult. I had been to Vail a few times before and had a general idea of where everything was. I parked and made my way through the snow and frosty air to the main entrance to the hospital. I hadn't drunk anything stronger than beer since I got married, but suddenly, I really wanted a bottle of Jack Daniels. I walked up to the information desk, identified myself, and told the guy why I was there. He told me the room number, and I headed to the elevator. When I got up to the floor, I discovered that the room he told me was in the locked intensive care unit. I went up to the nurse and told who I came to see. She called someone and then told me to go to the door and wait to be let in. Once in the secure area, I was greeted by a short, blonde nurse. Her ample bosom struggled against the array of buttons that did a heroic job of keeping her paisley top closed. "Your wife is under the influence of sedatives," she said. "Unless it's my wife," I thought. "You must prepare. She suffered horrific injuries and may not appear to be herself. She won't be able to hear you, but I want to make sure you can handle what you see. I won't be surprised if I can't recognize her," I thought. But my voice still cracked when I said, "Enter me." I was not at all prepared for what lay on the bed. I saw heaving chests that showed him to be a woman. She was tall enough and well-built enough to be my wife, but looking at her face, I couldn't tell. Wow! Did she ski into every tree on the mountain? "Oh no," the busty nurse replied. "She didn't ski. This morning someone beat her up and left her in the ambulance." "Beat her up? Did you quit?" Faithful wives are not beaten or abandoned in an ambulance. I had to agree with my inner self, but still didn't know enough to react. "I can't tell you one way or another whether this is my wife," I told her. "Maybe this will help," she said, lifting the blanket to expose the woman's left thigh. Here was all the necessary proof that it was her. I haven't seen many women running around with Jiminy Cricket tattooed on their inner thighs. I never understood why she did it, but she did it shortly before our wedding. It was done at the last minute before her bachelorette party, and she never explained its meaning, other than that she had always loved Jiminy, and he seemed to symbolize her parents, Jim and Yvonne. I never fully believed this answer, but it was the only thing she was selling. It was difficult for me to look at her. The only time I saw my wife suffer was also the first time I met her. My friends and I went to a Tool concert. We had a case of beer in the back of the van for the after-show party. After the concert, we were having fun when a girl came up and said that her boyfriend wanted a beer. My buddy Chad told her that she could stay and have a few drinks with us, but we weren't interested in providing for her boyfriend. She begged one last time, but Chad sent her packing. A few minutes later, I heard a scream in the direction where the girl had gone. I saw several people pointing at something. Looking closer, I saw some guy beating the crap out of a girl. I've never liked guys who think it's okay to hit a woman, so I immediately took action. I instantly got there and recognized the girl lying on the ground as the one who had asked for beer. The guy who beat her was about 1.5 meters tall and, well, 45 kilograms. He definitely had small man syndrome. "Where's my damn beer, you damn bitch?" he shouted, striking her. She raised her hands above her head, trying to fend them off. "Answer, damn you!" By this time I had reached it. Why isn't anyone helping this girl? I asked myself. I grabbed him by the collar and pulled him away from her. "Leave her alone, boy," I said. "We didn't give her beer for you because you're a fucking freeloader. You better not stick your nose into my affairs before you get hurt." I laughed at the thought that this puny little man could make me suffer. He seemed to get even angrier and began hitting the girl on the head. I beat him up. I reached down, helped the girl up, and moved toward the van, where Chad was already preparing an ice pack. "He will be unhappy that you did this." I looked back and saw a greasy, hairy, homeless guy who looked like a bastard. "And what will this little weirdo do?" "I'll tell you what he'll do. He'll crawl back into the hole you idiots came out of and hope he never sees me again." I took her back to the van, and we gave her some ice. I saw the security team approach the fallen loser. His buddies stood silently with their hands in their pockets as the cops picked up the little guy and threw him into the squad car, along with the 3 other intoxicated specimens they had rounded up. I made a move to go over and tell them what he did when the girl grabbed my arm. "Please do not. You've done enough for me today." No one had ever stood up to Garrett, let alone hit him. Now he'll probably go back to Wyoming. The girl had a very beautiful face. Even with Marilyn Manson's contact lenses, she was very attractive. I once again asked myself the question, why the most beautiful girls always go to complete fools? We took her home after having a blast. She had some bruises, but she seemed okay. After we dropped her off, Chad said to me, "Dude, I think she wants you." Damn it, dude. Why the hell would she want me? She's just grateful that I stopped that meteorite from beating her up. "I don't know why she needs you, but she gave me this for you." And he handed me a piece from one of the beer boxes. It was too dark to try to read, so I just put it in my back pocket so I could read it when it was light. Didn't want Chad to stop under a streetlight or anything. I would never hear the end of it. When I got to my apartment that evening, I looked at a piece of cardboard. There was a phone number and the words, "Call me, Joy." My smart voice immediately said, "Okay, I'll call you, Joy." After that, I went to bed. 2 days later, I called her. I didn't expect her to remember me, but when I told her who I was, she replied, "I was already starting to think that you would never call me." We ended up talking for an hour before she needed to go somewhere. I enjoyed talking with her, and I was pleasantly surprised when she called me in the evening and we talked until midnight. We went on our first date on Friday night. I took her to a little Italian restaurant in the foothills, and then we went to a bar where there was live music. They drank, they danced, and when the bar closed, I took her to her house. "Are you trying to get me into bed?" she asked. "There will be plenty of time for that later." I don't like sex on the first date. I think it's more interesting to wait a few dates. With these words, I kissed her on the cheek and went home. A total of 3 weeks passed before I saw her again. I didn't want to admit it, but every time I slept with a girl after the first date, it always went bad within a month or 2. I guess I became paranoid. We talked on the phone almost every chance we got, but matching free time seemed damn impossible. If I was free, she worked. One of the weekends we had, her Aunt Mary passed away and she flew to Florida with her family for the funeral. Finally, the weekend after my aunt's funeral, we were able to go to the movies. I picked her up and her father met me at the door. I didn't know what to expect when he asked me to come in. "Nice to meet you, Roger. I'm Jim." He asked what I did for a living and wondered if I had lived in the Springs all my life. Then he attacked me. "Listen, son. Looks like you're a much better match for Joy than that little loser. It's a pity that he will never come here and meet me," he said, clenching his hands into fists. "He met me," I said with a grin. "I hope he's smart enough to stay away, but I doubt his intelligence." "Yes, he's not too much. Actually, He was interrupted when Joy entered the room. When she saw me, she smiled widely and hugged me. She wore a sexy dress that showed off her body to perfection. It emphasized every nuance of it and turned her into a walking wet dream. I suddenly rethought my 3 dates before sex rule. In the end, we didn't actually have sex until our next date. The evening I met her father, she needed to be at work early in the morning, and she begged me to refuse all subsequent arrangements, but with the caveat that I was in her debt. The following Friday, we went for dinner. I didn't pick up on any of the signals I'd picked up on our previous dates, though she might not be interested in that evening. While driving her home, she suddenly began to experience stomach cramps and said that she urgently needed a bathroom. My apartment was only a block away, so I rushed there and let her in so she could use the restroom. She thanked me profusely as she ran to the toilet. Even if I was going to try to have sex, she wouldn't want to now, I thought to myself. He sat down on a stool and waited for her to finish her urgent business. A few minutes later, I heard the toilet flush. "Oh, thank you," I heard her say as she entered the living room. I turned around. The words, "no problem," were about to sound coherent when my breath caught in my throat. Joy walked into my bathroom wearing nice jeans, a black turtleneck, and a leather jacket. Joy, standing in front of me now, was wearing only skimpy red panties and high-heeled boots. I must have just been staring because she laughed and said, "Take off your coat and stay like that for a while." I took off more than my coat. The next morning, we went to have breakfast at a shop located in the next block. After breakfast, we didn't go out until dinner. On Sunday afternoon, I took her home. Before she got out of the car, she said that her damn boss would be killed if he ever asked her to work on the weekend again. "It's impossible to keep a girl from her favorite illicit substance," she said, looking at me. "If I'm still her drug of choice, then why is she now in a drug-induced coma?" I followed the nurse back from the room to the infirmary, signed a bunch of papers, and then was handed her personal belongings. They didn't really want to be responsible for them. "The police have already examined everything," the nurse told me. "In the bag, there is a detailed list of all things." At that moment, the intercom buzzed. She picked up the phone and spoke to someone. I realized she was talking about Joy. She told someone that she had just given her things to her husband. Then she handed the phone to me. "Mr. Rigby?" asked the voice on the other end. "Yes, it's me. This is Detective Phillips again. I don't want to bother you, but could you come to the police station and answer a few of our questions?" I said I didn't mind, and she gave me the address. I thanked the nurse and walked back to my car. "The cops think you beat her up. Why should I hit her? Because she is a traitor? I have no evidence of her cheating. You have to admit, just her being in fucking Vail looks pretty damn suspicious." "Yes, but there may be a logical explanation for this. For example, what? Naive. Like last year when she won a week in Florida. Do you remember? Sand, sex, sun, and all those bikini asses we could look at? Okay, she probably won a trip to Vail, flew to Denver, rented a car, and got her ass kicked before she could tell you the big news." I admitted it was suspicious. "Hey, I'm just saying that mistakes were made. Yes. Joy had to ask me to meet her in Denver so we could go to Vail together. But then she would have to tell you about her gigolo, and you would get angry, involving lawyers, Marines, and nuclear warheads, dirty, cheating women of easy virtue. Damn it, I'd love to beat the crap out of her. Do you have proof that she was with someone else? No. Do you have proof that she has at least dated someone else since you got married? No. So until we know more, why be angry? Aren't you the bastard who was still pushing the theory of treason? The inner voice of your mind reserves the right to change its position." Jerk. I reached the police station just as the sun was setting. At the front desk, I told the guy who I was, and he called someone. Very soon, a decent brunette and a tall man who looked like harrowing came out to greet me. The brunette introduced herself as Detective Phillips, and Harry Reams as Deputy Devon. Phillips seemed pretty nice, and Devon seemed like one of those assholes who's just waiting for someone to commit a crime. He looked at me like I was Ted Bundy. "Should I invite a lawyer? Do you have reason to believe that you need a lawyer?" "No, I have nothing to hide." Detective Phillips led me into a room and motioned for me to sit down. Devon headed in the other direction. "I'm going to tape our conversation, Mr. Rigby. Is that okay?" "No, I don't have any problems. Sorry about that incident with the bastard." "Forgive me for what?" she asked. "When I called you a bastard on the phone, I thought you were my friend pestering me during my me time." "What is your me time?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "And what does it consist of?" "In films about the Second World War. Joy hates them, so when she leaves town, I sit and watch war movies until she gets back." At that moment, Deputy Devon came in and sat down. "Are we ready?" "Yes," said Detective Phillips, pressing the switch on the wall, which, as I assumed, turned on all the voice recorders in the room. "For the record, Detective Desiree Phillips is interviewing Mr. Roger Rigby in connection with Case 1256G, where the victim is Joy Tanya Rigby. So, Mr. Rigby, please tell me your name, age, and date of birth." "My name is Roger Ezekiel Rigby. I am 35 years old, and I was born on December 16th. Please state your address and occupation for the record." "I live at 1467 West Danube Avenue in Colorado Springs. I am a bricklayer." "Can you tell me where you were between 6 o'clock last night and 8 o'clock this morning?" "Well, let's see. From 9 this morning until 7 this evening, I was in Manitou Springs repairing a fireplace. From 7 to 8:30, I was on the road from Manitou to Jerry's Bar, on the northwest side of town, near my house. Left Jerry's around 11 and was home by 11:30, and stayed there until you called. Can anyone confirm that you were in these places at this time? Mrs. Blanche Donovan can confirm my presence at her home in Manitou, Paul Hannibal that I was at Jerry's, and my neighbor Stephen Harper can confirm that I was home at midnight and again at 3 in the morning and again at 6 morning. And how can Stephen confirm that you were at home at these specific moments? Devon asked in a hoarse voice. Because we both have dogs that need to pee and poop at the same time. Stephen is a night owl, and when he sees me walking the dog, he always has to come out to say hello and let Bosco do his business. They conferred for a moment, then Phillips continued her questions. When did you last see your wife? Monday morning when I drove her to the airport so she could fly to Houston. Why would she fly to Houston? To the annual general meeting of her company. Only the top performers in each region qualify to participate, and this is the 3rd year in a row she's going. What does your wife do? Sells life insurance for TransUnited. You know those damn commercials on TV where the old Asian guy is trying to tell a 5-year-old how to prepare for the inevitable? The fucking kid can barely draw on paper, and this guy is telling him he needs to be prepared so his loved ones aren't burdened. I keep thinking, hey idiot, let the kid watch cartoons while you go jump in front of the bus. I realized I was going on a rant, but I hate this stupid ad of theirs. Do you understand what kind of advertising I'm talking about? They both nodded. I wince every time that damn commercial comes on TV. And she flew to Houston? Now, this seems to be the million-dollar question. I saw her carry her suitcase to the airport and then went to work. I had an appointment that I had to attend. You didn't go with her to the reception? No, I wanted to. I planned to get us to the airport an hour before she checked in and went through security. I was hoping we could have breakfast together before she left. So why didn't you have breakfast? When we were 2 miles from the airport, she suddenly remembered that she had not taken her bag from the bed, and we had to return home to pick it up. How could she forget something as important as her luggage? She stated that she thought I took her into the car when I went to warm it up. Why didn't you take your bag with you in the car? Because when I told her I was going to start the car, my bag was still lying open on the bed. I didn't even notice she didn't have one when she finally got to the car. How often does your wife go on business trips? Twice a year, 2 weeks in February for the general meeting and 2 weeks in August for meetings and training seminars in Indianapolis. Does the meeting take place in Houston every year? No, he's moving. Last year she was in Los Angeles and New York, and this year she was in Houston. They joked again, and then Denton asked, Mr. Rigby, do you know anyone who would like to harm your wife? No one I know, well, with the exception of maybe a few of her clients. Why would they want to harm your wife, Mr. Rigby? Well, the way the company has their salespeople break into your home to sell you crap is kind of a scam. Most of the people she sees are people who have signed up for the free children's information kit. My wife calls them and tells them that she has their set and she needs to meet them in person to deliver it. After she hands them the kit, she starts offering them life insurance. Real high blood pressure shit. Did she meet with clients in Vail? How should I know? Her ass should be in Houston with others doing the same shit. Do you know anyone she could be with? I gave them a list of her colleagues that I knew. Some of them may have traveled to Houston with her and could tell why she wasn't there. Devon sighed and looked at Phillips. Okay, Mr. Rigby, you can go. Are you planning to go home tonight? No, I guess I'll find a motel. When I left, they gave the usual parting words. We'll be in touch. As I was driving back to the hospital, I suddenly realized that I had many more questions than answers. Was Joy making fun of me? I don't have hard evidence, but it seems suspicious to me that a week ago I dropped her off at the airport so she could fly to Houston, Texas, and less than a week later, she found herself in a hospital bed in Vail, Colorado. When I returned to the hospital, I was informed that visiting hours were closed for the day, but I could return at 7 in the morning. I asked the guard if he knew of any cheap but decent hotels nearby. He said that decent ones are not a problem, but in Vail, during the ski season, cheap is a relative term, meaning that you are staying with relatives. I politely laughed at his joke and headed back into the cold. Then I remembered that I had Joy's things. I pulled out the inventory sheet, looked through it, and didn't see what I was looking for. I looked at the items that the police asked not to be returned. The only thing on the list was a prescription bottle with 5 Percocet pills in it. Joy had had her tooth root treated 3 weeks earlier and did not need all the pain pills. I didn't understand why she carried them with her. When I saw that the returned inventory included her boots, I examined the bag to find them. Joy's boots traveled wherever she went. There's an almost invisible flap inside that can be used to hide credit cards, or more appropriately, a motel room key card. She reasoned that if she hid the room key in this flap, we would still have access to the room if we were robbed while walking. I found the valve, and sure enough, there was a key card. The only problem was that the card was empty. There is no color scheme or any identifying logos on it. It was completely white, so if you dropped it while riding, it would be the end of it. So now I have the key to her room, but I have no idea where the room is. Where's her cell phone, you stupid ass? Her cell phone! I looked through the list and didn't see it, then looked in her purse to see if she had hidden it. He's not there. Actually, this is a good sign. A few months ago, my neighbor Steven had a problem. His life partner Joe had to buy a new mobile phone every few weeks because he would misplace it and forget where. Usually it was on a shelf in a store or on a table in a restaurant. Steven, who was a software developer for a company that specialized in mobile phone applications, created an application that could use the phone's GPS to track his location. Joy had also lost a few phones, so he gave me a copy of the app for her phone. That was great. I could open the app, enter her phone number, and it would spit out the distance and direction. As you got a mile closer, he became more specific. The only problem was that he couldn't tell the difference in altitude. I found out about this when she lost her phone in a store. She was damn sure he was still in that store. When I launched the app, it took me not to the store, but to my home. In the house, it led me to the sofa. I looked all over the sofa, under it, and even under the pillows. Then it dawned on me that our bedroom was located above the living room. Upstairs, the device pointed the way to our bedroom, and there, between Joy's nightstand and the bed, was her cell phone. It's good that the application runs from the phone's memory, so if the phone is turned off or the battery is dead, the phone can still be found. I opened the app on my phone, and it immediately told me I was 4 miles northeast of Joy's phone. I started the car and started driving along the winding path towards the mountain. When I got to the base of the ski resort, he led me to a road leading to several luxurious ski lodges. I don't know who he is, but he has class. Shut up, bastard. I have a lot to look at before jumping to any conclusions. As I turned into the cabin driveway, the indicator finally told me I was half a mile from the phone. The house was 4 stories high, and I saw a lot of Lexuses and Audis in the parking lot. I was glad I drove Joy's BMW rather than my old work SUV. I saw that the house had 2 entrances. One leads past the reception into the restaurant and lounge area, and the other leads directly into the lobby. I decided to use the second one. I decided that I would have to explain less if I didn't go past the receptionist. I entered the hallway and moved down the corridor. The indicator on my phone said that Joy's phone was in room 114. I tried using the key card and nothing worked. Without thinking twice, I returned to the corridor and climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. I moved until the indicator showed that Joy's phone was in room 214. The key card did not work again, and I headed towards the stairs to the 3rd floor. I stopped near number 314. I felt like I didn't have a plan. Should I go into this room and beat the crap out of its occupant? Or call Detective Phillips and ask her to come? I didn't know if there was anyone in the room at all, let alone the man who beat Joy. I put my ear to the door. I couldn't hear the TV or voices, so I inserted the key card and the lock opened. I pressed the handle and the door began to move inward. I opened the door all the way and stepped back, expecting something to fly at me. The room was dark and I could see very little of the light coming through the open door. I carefully made my way inside until I found the switches. I pressed my back against the wall and flicked the switch. The light in the hallway came on, as did the lone lamp at the far end of the room. I felt like a policeman or soldier protecting the room. He pressed his back against the wall, closing the door. I turned the latch on the door and pressed my back against it. I couldn't see anything in the bathroom or in the entire room, and I decided to clear the main part of the room first. What if someone slips out of the bathroom? This thought made me decide that I needed to inspect the bathroom first. What if someone is hiding behind the wall and slips behind you? Just shut up if you're not going to help. The lips are sealed. I finally managed to ignore my inner voice and reached over and turned on the bathroom light. No one came out with an axe. No one snuck out of the main room and blew my brains out. Then I moved to the main room. As I approached the corner of the entrance, I could see about 3/4 of the room. I just stepped around the corner and saw that there was no one in the room. Joy's suitcase sits on her neatly made bed, her cell phone charges on her nightstand, and her laptop sits on a small table by the window. I suddenly felt that the room looked too clean. It doesn't look like anyone has been in it before now, but it also doesn't look like it's been cleaned by a professional maid. I returned to the bathroom and examined it carefully. There were a few wet spots on the sink, like someone had tried to clean it, but without any actual cleaning products. The soap was in a soap dish in the shower and not in a wrapper. The towels at the bottom of the small pile of towels were not as neat as those at the top and were damp. Someone tried to make the room look like it had never been used before. The bed is made, but the quilt hangs unevenly. You should be a cop. Speaking of cops, I wonder if I should call them. For what? It doesn't look like she was beaten here. I pulled back the blanket and saw that someone was sleeping on the sheets, but there were no signs of violence. None of the walls appear damaged. I took Joy's phone and sat down at the table with it. While I waited for her laptop to boot, I looked at her phone. This was easy because Joy never password protected anything. When I opened her laptop, the thought suddenly struck me that no one knew where I was. First, I called my sister Beth and asked her to look after my dog. I didn't tell her exactly why I was in Vail, just that I had business to deal with and would be back home in a day or two. My next call was a little more difficult. I called my father-in-law, Jim, and told him everything I knew. He, like me, hoped that this was simply a case of her winning the trip again. I told him I would call the next day after talking with the doctors. The last call I made was to my cousin Hugh. Hugh is a detective with the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. He lives only 3 miles from me, and we spend a lot of time together. He told me to be sure to tell the Vail police that I found out where Joy was staying. I asked him if he could contact the Vail police so we could be kept in the loop. He said he would do it, and we ran away. Then I had an idea. I took out my cell phone, called the lodge reception, and asked for Joy Rigby. "I'm afraid we have no registered guests with that last name, sir," came the answer. "Maybe she registered under her maiden name." "What about Joey McIntyre?" "Sorry, sir. No one is registered with this surname either." I thanked the employee and hung up. By then, Joy's laptop had fully come to life. I looked it up, but the entire history was erased. I knew Joy didn't do this because she never deletes anything. I opened both of her email accounts and found that they had also been cleared. Her password for both was simple: my date of birth. I knew I could take the laptop to Stephen. He and Joe are highly skilled programmers and know how to extract missing information from computers. I looked through her mobile phone and found the same thing. All her SMS messages have been deleted. Joy has gotten better about deleting text messages now because her phone gets too slow if she doesn't do it. But she never deleted the entire folder. I'll see if Stephen can help with that too. I stood up and walked over to her suitcase. He opened it and took out all the things. But I only found one business suit, which she was wearing that day when I dropped her off at the airport. There were 3 cocktail dresses, and the rest was lingerie. Now I knew that I was most likely heading to court for a divorce. The next morning, I took a quick shower, grabbed Joy's cell phone and laptop, and left the room. I left her suitcase the same way I found it. I spent the night in a chair by the table. It was uncomfortable, but I could not bring myself to sleep on the bed. I drank a cup of coffee in a small cafe and then called Detective Phillips. "You should say, 'Time to get up, motherfucker,' when she answers." I was glad my inner smartass was still alive because I felt like crap. I was surprised that she didn't sound sleepy at all when I called her. "Detective Phillips, this is Roger Rigby. Last night I was going through an inventory of my wife's belongings and found a hotel key card in some of her things. I thought I should pass it on to you in case it helps you in her case. She thanked me and said that she would meet me in half an hour." I drove aimlessly around Vale for 25 minutes and then headed to the police station. Detective Phillips greeted me as soon as I entered the lobby. "Hello, Mr. Rigby," she said, shaking my hand. "Good morning," I replied, handing her the key card. "Here she is. Will you come with me, Mr. Rigby?" She led me down the corridor to the office. "You look like a man whose world has collapsed. Don't want to unwind?" I don't know why, but I told her that I found the number using Joy's phone. She frowned a couple of times, but seemed to feel better when I said I didn't touch the bed. I gave her Joy's phone, but didn't mention the laptop. "What are you going to do now, Mr. Rigby?" "Don't know. I think that I will most likely lose my wife because of this. I'd like to hear her explanation, but I don't think I can believe it." "Don't lose hope just yet, Mr. Rigby. There may be a logical explanation for this that does not involve extramarital affairs." She said it confidently, but I could read from her face that she didn't see any other options. I thanked her and went to the hospital. I was sent to the NICU waiting room until the next 15-minute visiting session began. There, patients are allowed to visit for 15 minutes every 2 hours. After the second 15 minutes of wishing that piece of flesh on the bed would wake up so I could ask her what the hell was going on, the doctor came out to see me. He was a guy about my age with sandy brown hair who looked like he should be an all-star quarterback. Dr. Benson assured me that Joy was recovering from her wounds, but asked if I would like her to be transported to Denver. St. Luke's has an excellent rehabilitation program for traumatic brain injuries, and I think her chances there will increase tenfold. He explained in medical terms what her injuries were, but all I understood was that she had been hit in the head, either by someone or had fallen on something, and could have brain damage. I then signed permission to transport her. She was scheduled to be transported the next day, and I asked Ed if they could call ahead so I could complete the paperwork at St. Luke's on the way home. "Where is your house?" he asked me. "Colorado Springs," I answered. He got a worried look on his face and asked me to wait a minute. He went to the table and made a phone call. A few minutes later, he came over. "Our plan has changed," he said. "We'll take her to St. Augustine Hospital in Colorado Springs. They have a program comparable to that of St. Luke's Hospital, and it will be easier for the family to visit her." He left, and the nurse brought me a new batch of papers to sign. I signed and then made my third and final visit before heading home. I stood and looked at her. My vision blurred as I thought about my future without her. "Joy, I don't know why you're here. I don't know what exactly is going on, but I do know that you seem to have more secrets than I think our marriage can handle. I won't file for divorce until I can talk to you, but I'm sure it's all over between us." I left the hospital with tears in my eyes. At least no one thinks it's weird when a guy walks around the hospital with tears in his eyes. If I were in a bar or an auto parts store, more people might look at me in surprise. On the way out of Vale, I called Jim. I told him that Joy would be transported to Colorado Springs and that I would arrive later to fill him and Yvonne in on the situation. When I returned home, I was relieved to see that my sister's Jeep was still parked in my driveway, because I could always talk to her about anything. I was greeted at the door by an enthusiastic Doberman, whom I named Piper. When I walked into the living room, I was greeted by Beth. Seeing her gave me great relief. She knew something was wrong as soon as she saw me. I hugged her and told her I loved her. Then everything came out. She held me when I broke down and mourned the end of my marriage. She stayed with me until late in the evening. She tried to persuade me to go to dinner, but I didn't want to eat. I knew that I still had to go and tell Jim everything. I allowed her to come with me for this part. By the time I told Jim and Yvonne everything I knew, I could see that he was no longer sure that his daughter was not treating me badly. I had already seen him look like that once. Joy and I had been dating for several months. They rarely spent weekends together and spent free evenings on weekdays together when her schedule allowed. One Thursday evening, Joy called me and told me that she would have to cancel our date for that weekend. I wasn't happy about it, but I knew that this happens sometimes. She was about to call when I heard Jim's voice. "Tell that son of a bitch he better meet me." I heard her make an indignant noise and tell me to just ignore it as she hung up. Needless to say, I was concerned as to why he was talking angrily about me. 10 minutes later, I was standing on the porch of her house, and Jim was screaming in my face, "You're no better than that little bastard. If you think you need to whip my daughter, be a man and whip me." "Should I whip your daughter?" "What?" I was shocked that he could even think such a thing. "Like what? Like she didn't go out last night? Didn't want to say that you are the king of shit? What makes you guys whip?" Now I'm a little angry. "First of all," I yelled, "the only little girl I spanked was that vile bitch Garrett the night of the concert when I met Joy. Secondly, I haven't seen or been around Joy since last weekend. We rarely see each other during the week. Third, I think you need to know some facts before you start yelling." At this point, Joy and Yvonne came out to see what was going on. I saw that Joy had a black eye. "What the hell happened to your eye, baby?" "You hit her, you idiot!" Jim yelled. I turned to face him. Just as I was about to say something rude, Joy chimed in. "He didn't hit me, Daddy." "I'm sorry, but last night I had dinner with Garrett, and we got into an argument." I stepped off the porch and headed to my car. Joy shouted, "Roger, come back." Jim caught up with me and spun me around. "Son, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have climbed." Joy came over. "Sorry, baby. It was just dinner." "Jim, I completely understand your anger. I'm sorry I spoke to you with less respect." "Joy, I'm sorry you got hurt again, but we're breaking up." I didn't hear any of their remarks as I slammed my car door and drove down the street. I drove aimlessly until I realized I was near Garrett's trailer park. I parked the car 5 spaces away and walked up to his front door. He knocked, and a moment later heard footsteps approaching the door. "Ah, bitch. I knew you would show up after all," he said with a grin. That grin quickly turned to surprise when I hit him. It looks like he wasn't expecting me. He fell backwards into the front room, and I pounced on him as he fell. I don't remember how many times I hit him. All I know is that, after a few times, he stopped reacting, so I kicked him a couple more times and got ready to leave. I saw that his trailer was filled with moving boxes. "Are you moving?" I said, turning to him, and heard a slight groan. "Then let me wish you a happy stay," I said, kicking him. I went home and put ice on my sore knuckles. When I entered the house, the phone rang. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. Before I could say any greeting, the heart-rending screams of my now ex-girlfriend fell upon me. "Roger, baby, please let me..." Click. I didn't have time to hang up when the ringing intensified. Caller ID said it was Joy, so I let her call. An hour after my phone rang, then stopped for a minute and rang again. It stopped ringing. I was glad she finally gave in. 10 minutes later, when the phone rang, I was furious and was about to answer as rudely as I could. But the caller ID said it was my cousin Hugh calling. He was calling to alert me that the CSPD, Colorado Springs Police Department, had received a call in which the caller feared that one Garrett Jimenez might be in danger. "I don't give a damn about this guy," I told Hugh. "No, but CSPD is going to contact you. It looks like Mr. Jimenez was found in pretty bad condition. All he could tell them was that some big guys came and kicked his ass." "I don't know any big guys, Hugh." "No, but the killer was afraid that you might harm this Jimenez guy. So, naturally, when he was found lying on the floor, the first person they called was your name." "Thanks for the warning, Huey." He hated being called Huey. "I have a good alibi." "Bastard, I hope so." By the time the police showed up at my door, I was ready. All my hockey equipment was stalked by my front door. I only had a small scratch on my knuckles, but they were swollen. Luckily, the officer didn't seem too interested in catching whoever had hurt Garrett. So my story about working on hockey equipment pretty much explained the condition of my hands. It didn't hurt that I was playing on a major league team sponsored by the police department. On Saturday, I went to the skating rink and skates almost until I dropped. I wanted to be ready for the upcoming season. One of the best defensemen on my team is not back, which means I will get more ice time. When I returned home in the evening, I saw several notes on my door. All but one were from Joy. The one that wasn't from her was from Jim. He wrote a letter of apology. He said that he was ashamed for believing that I could harm Joy. He also asked me not to be offended by his daughter for reacting this way. I immediately dialed their home phone number, and luckily Jim answered. I told him I didn't hold it against him for his reaction. You reacted the way any decent father reacts. It's not your fault that Joy didn't confess right away. Well, son, I'm glad to hear that. I've been worrying about this all night. Now, would you like to talk to Joy? I could hear her worried voice in the background begging him to give her the phone. No, I don't really want to talk to her, Jim. She again followed the lead of this bastard, knowing what a scoundrel he was, and then she let you believe that I hit her. On top of that, she ruined our date yesterday so that I wouldn't see her face. Sorry, Jim. I don't have time in my life for cheating women. Now, as I told Jim and Yvonne about everything I had learned in Vale, I realized that he, too, was remembering the old days. I don't know what to say, son. I'm glad they brought her here. I hope you're not thinking of doing anything rash. No, sir. I'm not hiring lawyers yet, but I'm getting ready for it. She'll have to do a damn good job of explaining this. Whatever happens, Roger, Yvonne and I think of you as a son, and I hope that if things get as bad as I fear, you won't cut us out of your life. I assured them that I would not cut them out of my life, and then Beth and I headed towards my house. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Beth asked me, "Will everything be okay with you? Do I have a choice?" Curling up and dying is definitely not an option. I'm sorry this is happening to you. If she cheats, is there any chance that you will stay together? No. I can't stand the thought of turning into one of those paranoid husbands who has to put GPS trackers in his wife's panties and spy cameras in every corner just to sleep at night. Mom asked about you. You know she loves you, and it would be good to talk to her, so that she can tell me that cheating on your wife is normal? To say that I should share my wife? No thanks. If there's one person on earth I should not talk to, it's her. Beth was always protective of our mother. When Daniel went to prison, she asked me to try to visit my mother more often. I visited her once. She started talking about how Danny should have been more open to communication, so I left. Joy chided me for being rude, but I told her I wasn't going to listen to that crap. And, I added, I would never accept a cheating spouse. I just wouldn't want you to make a decision that you'll regret later. Don't worry, little sister. Before I decide anything, I will have the answers. Soon after Beth dropped me off, I found myself in Stephen and Joe's living room. Stephen started flipping through Joy's laptop as soon as I handed it to him as I brought them up to speed. After half an hour, Stephen asked if I could leave the laptop with him for a day or two because he needed more time to dig into it. I didn't mind. Joe said that if I wanted, he would set me up with his cousin. Joe, if your cousin doesn't have C-cup breasts and a shaved pubic area, I'm not interested. Prude, he laughed. Joe was always trying to embarrass me, but I had no problem with his and Stephen's choices or lifestyle, so I was usually called jaded if I wasn't shocked, or prude if I refused sex. I stayed for a while and had a beer with Joe. Stephen had his nose buried in Joy's laptop and didn't even notice that there was someone else in the room. After the beer, Joe said it was time for him to go to bed. To be on time for work, he needs to get up at 3 in the morning. I'll probably go to bed and fuck around alone, thinking about my newly single, sexy neighbor. About? I said. I thought Mrs. Jasper had been a widow for a long time. Joe laughed and wished me good night. Stephen grunted or something like that as I walked away. I returned home and took Piper outside to do her chores and play tag for a bit. In the summer, I usually decide we've played enough ball. Piper can play until my arm falls off. But in the winter, I let Piper decide once we've played enough. Usually no more than 3 throws, and she's ready to go home. I climbed into bed and called Piper over to me. Joy hates it when I let her sleep in the bed, but at this point, I don't care what Joy wants or hates. Even though Piper is a big sleeper, I can't completely blame my bad dreams on her. The next morning I drank coffee and tried to concentrate on the sports section of the newspaper until 8. By 9, I was sitting in Bernie Jagg's office. Bernie is Joy's boss, and I knew he would answer my questions. "So, what can I do for Brian?" Bernie said cheerfully. I don't know why he always insisted on calling me Brian. "I'm Roger, Bernie. Just wanted to ask if you could shed some light on something for me." "Of course, Roger. How can I help? Is there any reason related to your insurance agency why my wife would leave the convention in Houston to go to Vail?" "Vail? To a ski town in Colorado? Northwest of here?" "Yes, that same Vail. Why should Joy be in Houston, Roger?" "For the general meeting of your company. This is the reason that was given to me. Well, you know, for your 10 highest paid people in the state." "Roger, I may be treading on something that could be toxic, but I think you're confusing some things. First, the meeting you mentioned was in Houston last week, but it doesn't involve the highest paid workers in the state. Joy is a so-called managing agent, meaning she has several less experienced people working under her. The top 10 agents in each office get to go to the meeting. Managing agents usually don't want to go. The meeting is more of an incentive for novice agents. I usually send one managing agent to the meeting. If I can't find a volunteer, then I choose one myself. Joy never went to a meeting. I was stunned and became more and more irritated with each passing moment. What about the training meetings in Indianapolis that she goes to every year? I require all of my managing agents to attend these meetings. I also sent some agents there. What can they learn there in 2 weeks? 2 weeks. We usually leave on Sunday and return on Thursday afternoon." When he spoke, I saw an understanding flash across his face. "I should have guessed. They always took 2 weeks off and stayed in another hotel." "They?" I asked. "And the other half of them are my wife's gentlemen?" "If I tell you about this, you must promise that no harm will come to any of them." "Bernie, my wife has already been harmed. She is in a coma, and the culprit is most likely the one with whom she communicated." "I really doubt it." He paused, as if he was about to give away the ending of the film. "Look, I know people are capable of almost anything, but some guys aren't violent. Bernie, I always knew you were a tough guy. If I could get answers straight from Joy, I would, but I can't. I give you my word that no one will get hurt." When he told me the name of the guy he thought Joy was with, I couldn't help but be surprised. That little fucking weasel. An hour after meeting Bernie, my cousin called me on my cell phone. "How are you, Zek?" My grandmother hated it when my parents named me Roger. No one ever said why, but she refused to call me by name. Instead, I decided to shorten my middle name and call it Zek. Everyone in my family jumped on board and called me Zek, everyone except Joy. "It's an unworthy name," she said, as if we were royalty. Hugh usually just called me an asshole, so I figured he must be with someone who didn't know me. "Hugh, what are you doing on this shitty morning?" "They called from Vail this morning." It seems they found out who rented the room where Joy was staying. We want to call him and invite him to come. If he refuses, we will identify him as a suspect and arrest him. "Can I be with you when you talk to Cal?" "I'm sure Jeb will." "Hey, did you tell Cal?" "Yes, Cal. Cal Davis." This morning I went to see Joy's boss. When I finished telling him everything I learned from Bernie Jigsaw, he exclaimed, "Damn, guy, you should have been a cop. I'll call you when we arrange an interview." I spent the next few hours in the hospital meeting with the brain injury team. Part of me just wanted to say, stick her in a corner somewhere and let her rot, but I still didn't have enough evidence. An hour before Joy was brought in from Vail, Jim and Yvonne showed up at the hospital. I told them what I had learned, and Jim couldn't believe his daughter would act like that. Yvonne simply begged me to wait until Joy was out of the woods, so to speak, before taking any action. I assured her that I would not harm Joy in any way, even if it meant living in obscurity for several weeks. "Do you think you can get through this?" "I don't know, Yvonne. Obviously, I can't trust her anymore. I saw what it did to my father. I have a lot to think about. That's all I know at the moment. But you already took her back once, Yvonne said with hope on her face. Damn, she's right. Yes, but we weren't married, and she didn't actively fool me, I replied. And he was right too. I didn't see Joy for 3 weeks after I beat Garrett. Halfway through the second week, she finally stopped calling. A week later, when I stopped dodging phone calls, I realized that Joy and I had not declared our relationship exclusive. Apparently, she was still dating that little slug of an asshole. Well, okay. I didn't call her my girlfriend, just assumed we were a couple, but the fact that she let her dad believe I hit her was the first, second, and third call. I just returned home from hockey practice. I was looking forward to a hot shower and ibuprofen. I grabbed my gear bags and walked up the stairs to my apartment. She was sitting near my door. I don't answer your calls, so that somehow gave you the idea to come here? Is there really a need to be an asshole? I missed you? You didn't miss me? Well, maybe I missed you if your boyfriend is still in bed. Oh, so that's it. You're still mad that I saw Garrett. I opened the door and said, no, in fact, this is what I'm least angry about. The only thing that really angers me is that you allowed your father to believe that I laid a hand on you. I walked in and realized that she had followed me. She opened her mouth to say something, but I immediately returned to the conversation. We never decided to be exclusive, so I can't be upset about you having sex with him. No. I'm angry at myself for not seeing things as they really are. My stupid ass thinks that if I sleep with a girl, then we date until one or both of us decide we don't. I threw my things on the floor and continued my tirade. I see it this way. We had several good meetings, you and I. You don't like that I'm not a piece of shit, or that I don't hit you. Okay, I'm not for everyone. You want a paranoid bastard who can't handle your sexual needs properly, so he has to beat you. Cool. Enjoy it. Maybe I'll send you both brass knuckles as a wedding gift. Are you finished? She stood with such a defiant look that only a girl can have when she's crying. Oh, I'm done. I just don't understand why you're still here. Listen, idiot. I'm sorry for letting my daddy think you hurt me, but the first thing I did was cancel our date so you wouldn't do something that would land a macho guy like you in jail. I left my phone at home when I went to Garrett's, and... Hey, you don't have to explain anything to me. I told you I'm done with this. No, you have to fucking listen to me. That afternoon, I went to see Garrett because he was moving to Wyoming. Yes, farewell, sex. Will we get to the point soon? No, not goodbye, sex. Just goodbye. I knew, or thought I knew, that I could have something special with you, Garrett asked. Rather, ordered me to go with him. When I said that I had someone else, he beat me. I ran away and hid from him at my friend Julie's house. I went home to call you so you wouldn't go hit him and get into trouble. I thought my dad was at a party at the bowling alley, but he saw me at the door. You saw my face, and then you know. Okay, I listened to your version. Now I have a hot shower date. When I said this, the expression on her face became funny. Until I said the word shower, she looked completely depressed. I still don't know what made me say that. Would you like to come with me? I didn't have to ask her twice. That evening, we decided that we were in an exclusive relationship. 3 weeks later, she moved into my apartment, and 8 months later, we got married. The only time Garrett was mentioned again was the evening she told me he had died in a car accident in Laramie, Wyoming. She went there for his funeral with one of her friends for 2 days. And now, a decade later, Joy is removed from the ambulance and taken to the intensive care ward at St. Augustine's Hospital. She looked nothing like she did in Vail. Doctors said she has a very good chance of making a full recovery. A few minutes later, we were taken back to the waiting room. After 30 minutes of sitting there, Hugh texted me that Cal Davis would be coming for an interview at 4 o'clock. I told Jim and Yvonne I had an appointment I couldn't miss and left. I returned home and let Piper out to do her business while I put on my suit and tie. I knew that if Sheriff Jeb Hannibal was allowing me to sit in on the interrogation, I had to look like a detective. I've known the sheriff all my life. He and my father worked together, and I was best friends with his son, Paul. Paul and I played football and hockey together. They were always on the same team until Jeb was elected sheriff and they moved to the north side of town to be closer to the office. Everyone knew that Paul and I would play professional hockey. Funny how a promise can be broken. While I was in college, my father died. I lost interest in the game and dropped out of school. My grandfather and uncle got me a job as a bricklayer when no one could persuade me to finish my studies in criminal law. 3 NHL teams had their eyes on Paul, and then, in his junior season, he broke his hip and his career stalled. Paul took a job with the Colorado Springs Police and coaches youth hockey. For us, there was always a choice, hockey or work in the police, and now I make a living laying bricks. When I arrived at the sheriff's office, Hugh came out to greet me. "Okay, Zeke, Vale. Police will be participating via video conference. We'll put you in a chair, away from their eyes," Jeb asked, "to remind you not to say anything, mainly because it might jeopardize the court case. Understood?" "Yes, and before you say anything, I know not to attack that freak. You know Nora and I have your back. Anything you need, just ask." We entered the department. We walked down the corridor to several interrogation rooms. There were several people milling around, and I recognized her immediately. For a moment, I was transported back in time to high school. I had the same feeling when I saw her then. Catherine Shepard was the sexiest girl in college, even as a freshman. Time was more than kind to her. With age, she only became prettier and became even more beautiful than she was when I looked at her during each of our joint classes. I've long dreamed of spending at least one night with her, but I never felt like I was in her league. She was the main cheerleader, queen at the school's graduation party, college prom queen. She was the beauty and elegance on the arm of the starting varsity quarterback, while I was a hockey outfielder. I was a defenseman who played second and third positions. Although I was the star of the hockey team was not a basketball team with cheerleaders and cheerleaders. The hockey team had its fans, mainly the parents and girlfriends of the guys on the team. As I stood there wondering whether she had married a doctor or a lawyer, a couple of sheriff's deputies ushered her into the room. "Stop drooling, Zeke," Hugh said, leading me into the room. Sheriff Jeb Hannibal stood there, grinning from ear to ear. "I've always wanted to do this," he said, pulling out a badge from behind his back. "I'm appointing you as a deputy so we can say that only law enforcement officers are in the room." He made me take the oath and then reminded me that I had to turn in my badge before leaving. He even hugged me after he handed me the badge. "Son, I hoped and still hope that someday you will receive a diploma and you'll come work for me. Your dad was a great cop, and I know you will be too." Hugh and I walked out of Jeb's office, my shield proudly displayed as my thoughts drifted back to Catherine Shepard. I already knew then that she was too much for me, but I wondered, if I had been the right boy in college, she would have turned out to be just as cheating. Somehow I doubted that she would be like that. Perhaps this is partly what made her unattainable for me. Perhaps the men in my family only know how to marry cheaters. I was sure that Daniel would agree with this assumption. We reached the room and went inside. Hugh pointed me to a chair that was not in the camera's direct line of sight. Hugh sat down on a chair at the conference table and began working on the keyboard. Soon I heard the voice of Detective Phillips and some other guy through the speakers. A few minutes later, a sheriff's deputy brought a good-looking bastard into the room. This guy had "salesman" written all over his face. This is the guy who moves you from a 5-year-old clunker in a parking lot to a shiny, nearly new, overpriced piece of crap that earns him a higher salary. I've never met Cal Davis face-to-face, but heard a lot about him. Even sitting in a room full of police officers, the smile never left the guy's face. He looked like he was sizing us up as potential clients. I had never met this man before, but I felt like I knew him from everything Joy told me about her mentor. "Okay," Hugh began. "Mr. Davis, we thank you for coming, and I must remind you that this interview is being recorded." "Sure, no problem," Cal said. "So, for the record, Detective Hugh McMillan of the El Paso County Sheriff's Department is here. I'm with Detectives Keith Douglas and Roger Riggs." "Roger Riggs? Isn't this a character from the movie Lethal Weapon?" "No, it was Martin Riggs, played by Mel Gibson. Roger Murtagh was played by Danny Glover." About. Also on video conference with us are Detective Desiree Phillips and Detective Ron Albert from the Vale Police Department. Mr. Davis, do you understand that you have been read your rights, and you agree to speak to us without a lawyer present? Yes, I agree. When they started asking the usual questions about his address and such, I realized that my intuition was telling me that this was the wrong guy. He had sex with Joy, but in no way did he hit her. This guy could sell ice cubes to Eskimos, and he has a wedding ring that cost more than my truck. He could charm a woman into doing his bidding, and he didn't seem like the kind of man who would risk his livelihood by being accused of domestic violence. Finally, we got to the questions I was waiting for. Mr. Davis, Philip's voice came through the speakers, can you tell us your whereabouts from today until Sunday? Yes, I was in Houston Monday through Friday for our company general meeting. I returned home on Friday evening and spent the entire weekend with my wife. So you've been at the meeting all week? Yes. Well, that makes things a lot easier, Mr. Davis, Philip said. Our last interrogation made us call 4 different people to confirm his alibi. In your case, all we need to do is call your employer and they will be able to provide us with all the necessary contact information. The smile never disappeared, but the tan, of course, turned white. There was an I'm screwed look in his eyes. I knew he was broken when Hugh asked if he would mind waiting a few more minutes while he called Bernie Jungs. Wait, Cal said. His confident swagger went AWOL. Can I tell you something without it becoming known to my wife? I saw the smirk on Detective Douglas's face and was amazed at how easily they had played Cal. He soon revealed that he had been sleeping with Joy for more than 6 years. I figured in my head that she started training with him about 6 years ago. He was very scared when he was told that this concerned Joy. I saw real fear when he asked if she was missing or if someone had killed her. When asked about Friday, the explanation was interesting. When it was time for me to leave, she called her husband and said that she had won a trip to Vale and was flying to Denver in 3 hours. I heard her talking on the phone. We then drove to Denver and I dropped her off at the terminal. All she was going to do was walk to the arrivals area and wait for him to pick her up. I went home. My wife can confirm that I have been home since Friday evening. The detectives received satisfactory answers to several more subsequent questions, after which Hugh signed a waiver for Vale's services and told Cal that he was free, but warned him not to leave the city for several weeks. Can I ask you one favor? Cal asked Hugh. You can ask, but I can't guarantee anything. Can I have a few minutes alone with Detective Riggs? Hugh looked at me and I said, I'll listen to him. I sat down opposite Cal in the chair that Hugh had just vacated. He looked depressed and broken. This was a far cry from the smiling, nothing can ruin my day guy who had walked into the room just 40 minutes earlier. So, Roger, is there any need for a formal introduction? He asked. Obviously not. You seem to know who I am. Joy keeps a photo of you in her presentation kit and on her desk in the office. She loves you, do you know that? No, he doesn't. If I did, we wouldn't be here. The problem is that I love her too. Well, at least 4 weeks a year, I added lightly. I bet your wife doesn't think too highly of your love. I love her, Roger. I love my wife too. She knows about my crush on Joy. Let me start from the beginning. I knew Joy was special the day I interviewed her for a position on my team. I felt like I had to take her under my wing and train her personally. As you know, there are days when people are simply not at home when we come to the presentation. One Saturday, we had several such no-shows and decided to have lunch at an old restaurant located next to the Army base. As we ate and talked, I realized we had chemistry and we ended up making love in one of those hotels that cater to military families. Afterwards, we didn't make love for about a month. Both felt guilty, but at the same time, we felt our chemistry. Not guilty enough to stop having sex, right? I asked humorously. It sounds cheap and tasteless when you say it like that. Cheap and tacky is the opposite of what Joy and I have. Sorry, I didn't know I was pissing on your little fairy tale romance. I understand your anger. I really understand, and I can't even imagine how you feel, but I don't regret my love for Joy one bit. I couldn't believe the crap this asshole was spewing. I was sure that if I hit him, no one would believe that he tripped and hit his face on the table. But I was going to control myself, and Joy was no longer my problem. So you're saying that you don't mind your wife running off with someone else twice a year? No, it's already hard for me to share Joy with you. This will no longer be a problem. You can take it for yourself. So you'll throw her aside because she loves someone else? Dude, are you dumb? You tell me you have a hard time sharing, and then in the next breath you expect me to do it. Go to hell. At least you would know what you are sharing. I had no idea. If I had known, we wouldn't have shared for long because I don't approve of cheating. You're probably right. That's why you and my wife went on trips. She traveled to Mexico City, San Diego, and Rio. You got Cabo San Lucas, Corpus Christi, and Miami. You were supposed to go to Vail, and my wife was supposed to go to Estes Park. The extra travel was getting too expensive, so we stuck with the local program this year. Additional trips? Last year I went to Miami, and that's the only time I've been out of state. I went to Vail to sign for her cheating ass. You guys have been having sex in Indy for 2 weeks, and the supposed meeting is 2 weeks. What the fuck do you mean about all these other cities? Joy and I felt bad about what we were doing. Therefore, to make amends, we gave our spouses vacations. She and I would spend a week of meetings together. Then she would invite you to where we were going for the second week, and I would return home. We'd spend a week meeting together in Indy. Then she'd go home, and I'd meet my wife for a week's vacation. Nonsense. Joy went away for 2 weeks each time, and I only went to Miami. I knew that room had been in use for too long for her to only spend 1 night there. So if she wasn't at home with you or any of the places I thought she was taking you, was she cheating on me? This damn guy actually started crying. Is it true? Cheated on you? Fuck you, buddy. Have a nice life and say hi to Joy. She's in St. Augustine's Hospital, room 2410. Tell her dad I'll be in touch. I headed towards the door, but stopped when he asked pathetically, "You're not going to tell my wife, are you?" Dude, I don't even know your wife. And if I knew, why would I hurt her? No, I won't tell her. It's much more pleasant to know that the feeling of guilt will eat you alive, although it won't. The traitor piece of shit has no conscience. Have a happy life, but remember, one day you will appear before the Almighty and answer for all this. I turned and left. Hugh was waiting for me in the corridor. Hey, Zeke, I'm really sorry. I thought we had the guy. Yes. As soon as he walked in there, I already knew that he was not the one who beat her. I just feel fucking stupid. How could this be happening under my nose all this time? I've never had... At that moment, I was interrupted by a commotion behind us. Hugh and I turned to see Katrina Shepard slapping Cal. You are a worthless, cheating son of a bitch! Don't come home, Calvin. I don't want to see you anymore. She sobbed loudly as the sheriff's deputy pulled her away from Cal. He had more than a few marks from the short blow. As they passed us, she looked at me. I was looking for words when she came up to me and hugged me so much that I almost lost my breath. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. It's not your fault or mine, I reasoned. It's just that we both accidentally found bitches to marry. She laughed and pulled away. I raised my hand and wiped a tear from her beautiful face. I hope everything will be okay with you, I told her. I had a few days to come to my senses. I wish you luck too, Roger, she said, kissed me on the cheek, and turned to leave. At that moment, I recognized the officer who was walking with her. It was her brother James. James was 2 grades behind us in school, so I didn't know him as such. Suddenly, I understood how she ended up at the sheriff's station that day. I looked at Hugh and said, he has this at home, and he needed to have sex with Joy? Some guys just want what they're not supposed to have, he said. We went down to Jeb's office so I could turn in my badge and listen to a lecture on how I could graduate and become a cop. I've heard it all before, and who knows, maybe one day I'll listen. I know I've been listening to that whisper in the back of my head that has been telling me that for the last 10 years, I've been missing out on something. The next few days were pretty damn stressful for me. I spent Tuesday looking for a lawyer who wouldn't let me get my ass kicked in my divorce. I didn't really expect to fight, but I wanted to be ready. I hired a guy from a firm in Denver that only handled men's cases. Usually they fought tooth and nail to get the best deal for the fathers, but in my case they said they would do everything they could to protect me. I was damn glad Joy and I weren't going to have kids. Quite recently we discussed this topic, but never decided. There wasn't much to argue about. Piper was mine and belonged to me since we got her as a puppy. The house we live in belonged to Grandma Joy, so I wasn't even going to try to take it. In fact, according to the title deeds, it belongs to Jim. My brother and I inherited my father's house when he died. At the time, I had an apartment and Daniel lived with his wife, so they used my dad's house, and I received a small rent from them for it. When Daniel walked into her boyfriend's apartment and smashed their heads in, her family tried to take Daniel's house away to ease their grief. Luckily, I hired a real lawyer who saved the house. The court found that I would have owned a majority interest in the house because Daniel was paying me rent. The family was furious, but I kept the house, and now I was very happy because I wouldn't have to move into some crappy apartment. Joy was angry that I spent money fighting for the house, but I told her that the cheater's family would never get what my father paid for. In retrospect, perhaps I should have thought about her cavalier attitude. Late on Tuesday evening, I showed up at the hospital. Jim kept watch as I expected. He looked up, saw my face, and just shook his head. "How long ago?" he asked. "As far as I can tell, 6 years since she started selling insurance." But I feel like there's more to it than what we know. I can't believe my daughter can be so deceitful. Me too. I would never have married her if I knew she was a cheater. I continued the story about everything that Cal told me. "I always wondered why she never came back from her trips with photographs," Jim said. "When she was younger, she took pictures every time we went somewhere, even if it was just Denver. Why didn't I notice this?" I didn't notice either. I told him that I would no longer visit the hospital. I can't bear the thought of talking to her again. He understood and asked if I would stay in the house until she was ready to go back there, just to make sure there was no damage. I replied that I already planned to do this. I also told him that I would not submit documents to her until she recovered. I realized that I would miss him and Yvonne. They treated me like a son the entire time I knew them. It's not their fault that they raised lying trash. On Wednesday, I was working on a chimney repair, and in the evening, I had a hockey match. I spent most of the first period in the penalty box, serving a punishment for rough play. 2 minutes into the second period, I got another one, and our coach took me out of the game. He was a close friend of Paul's, so he knew why I was playing rough, but he also didn't want me to get kicked out of the league. When I returned home, I was in a bad mood. We lost the game, and I took most of the blame for letting my personal problems affect my performance. No one on. The team would let me take the blame, and several guys asked if I wanted them to go see Cal. Perhaps I did not express my refusal of their offer too clearly. When he got home, Piper was ready to go outside. As I watched her run around the yard, I reminded myself that I needed to look at the fence at Daddy's house. While Piper was doing her business, I was about to go into the house, and Stephen shouted from the window that he would come in a few minutes. I wondered what he found on Joy's laptop. I had spent the previous evening looking through our desk to find anything. I looked at all the bills and bank statements I could find and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. How the hell does she pay for these trips? The only thing I found that was even remotely inappropriate was that she called her friend Fiona more frequently before trips. She usually calls Fiona once a month, but as the trips got closer, the frequency increased to twice a week. I was sure of two things. Fiona knew more about what was going on than I did, and Fiona wasn't telling me a damn thing. I have never met this woman. Another fact that, until this moment, did not seem strange to me. When I tried to dial Fiona's number, I only received an advertising voice telling me that I had reached my voicemail box. I suddenly regretted that I didn't have Joy's cell phone. When Stephen walked into the house, he looked like a child who had discovered where his parents hid their Christmas presents. "So, what did you find, Steve? Bring me a beer, we'll sit down, and I'll show you everything." I grabbed a couple of bottles of beer from the refrigerator, and we sat down at the bar. Stephen opened Joy's laptop and turned it on. "Whoever erased the tracks definitely knew what they were doing," said Stephen. "There are several programs on this laptop that I know you didn't install here. Don't be offended, Zeke. You make me do all your computer stuff. I know I don't know a damn thing about computers, dude. So, I'm not offended. Okay. First, I found a program that allows Joy to go online and use the internet without recording her browser history. Even history that cannot be erased is undone. Luckily, my friend from the Department of Defense was there yesterday to help me figure it out. He checked some of his materials and we found a lot. Are you saying that Joy is a computer genius and I didn't know it? Oh, hell no. Joy uses the same password for everything. No. This was put together by someone who really knows what they're doing. My brain instantly ran through a list of all the people Joy knew who didn't know a damn thing about computers. And Fiona's name came up again. She was something of a wizard at a software company that specialized in defense issues. So what was this bitch hiding? I asked, without a hint of humor in my voice. All I could see was that she had accessed the cloaking program for her email account and bank account. So, this is how she pays for these trips, I said, thinking out loud. What trips? I immediately told Stephen what I had learned from Cal. His eyes got bigger and bigger as I continued. When I finished, he just said, "You know, I can't tell Joe that you have a badge. He will never stop begging you to wear the uniform for him." Dude, I was wearing a suit. Not the form. And in general, did you read these letters? Letters? Oh, yes. When I logged into her account, it was deleted, but this will remain between us. I hacked into the mail server and found several deleted emails. Most of them are loved ones. You know, all the nonsense that teenagers write to each other. Several said that they would meet in well this week. So, is there any guess as to who or by whom these letters were written? Some were to the email address of a certain Cal Davis. Others to the address Cricket 4207. I couldn't find the name associated with the account, but in one of the emails, she calls him Garrett. Son of a bitch. You said it yourself. Son of a bitch. Before he left, Stephen showed me how to log into the bank account and email account he had found. He recovered the email and changed the password and security information to ensure no one else could access the account again. He did the same with the bank account. That one was opened in a bank in Denver, under Joy's name. I walked into the bank and was amazed at how much money was in the account. Somehow, under my nose, she raised over $10,000. We weren't short of money, but I had no idea where she could have gotten it. I reviewed the account history and saw that throughout the life of the account, there were periodic withdrawals from ATMs that I knew Joy did not have access to. There were also several withdrawals after Joy was hospitalized. All deposits are made at local ATMs. The first step was to arrange for all these funds to be transferred to our joint bank account. As soon as I did this, I filled out the form on the website to close the account. I was informed that the operation would be performed at 7 a.m. After that, I changed all the contact information on the bank account to my personal email so I would know if anyone tried to change anything. Then I wanted to know more about Fiona because I was sure that she could tell me how the dead man could have beaten my wife. When I couldn't find anything on Facebook, I went and found Joy's school albums. Found Garrett. He graduated from high school with Joy. Looked through the classes around them and found nothing. Finally, I pulled out freshman Joy's diary and saw the one I was looking for in my senior year. Fiona Jimenez was Garrett's sister. I needed to make a call. "Hello?" asked the sleepy voice of Detective Phillips. I looked at the clock, saw that it was already 1 in the morning, and suddenly felt guilty for calling her. "Detective Phillips, this is that is Roger Rigby." "Roger Rigby? Don't you mean Detective Riggs? How did you know that I was there?" "Your friend Detective McMillan forgot to turn off the video, and I saw you sitting with Mr. Davis." "Actually, Hugh is my cousin, and obviously not very tech-savvy. But I didn't call you to talk about Hugh. I called because I think I know who attacked my wife. I heard her perk up and grab something to write it down. I told her about the bank account, not telling her how I found it, and mentioning that I didn't mention that a debit card was missing from Joy's personal belongings when I picked them up. I cited stress as the reason I didn't notice the card was missing. I gave her a brief description of Garrett and where the card had been used that morning. Then he apologized for waking her. "Hey, don't worry about it. It's work-related. You know, you should be a cop." "I hear this all the time." "Well, I'll let you sleep. Good night." She wished me good night and hung up. I envied and at the same time pitied her husband. I envied him that he could listen to that sexy voice during passion. I also knew that being a police officer, even in a small department like Vale, puts a strain on a family. Some spouses can handle this, but some, like my mother, cannot. People whined and looked at the door, a sign that she needed to go out. When I took her out, I saw Steven on the porch. "Hey, Steven, do you still have access to the DMV databases and shit?" "And to hell? I always have access to databases, Zeke. You know me better than—" "Yes, I know, Mr. Hacker Deluxe." I always made fun of his nickname in the chat. One day I went to him to ask something and saw him in the chat under the nickname Hacker Deluxe. Because of this, I made fun of him from time to time. I told him the name I wanted to know about and said goodnight. I knew I had made his night by giving him a reason to break into some place. As soon as I was in my house, my body made me understand that the day had been long and I needed to sleep, and I agreed with it. The next morning, I was woken up by the phone. My father-in-law was on caller ID, so I answered. "Hello, Father." "Good morning, Roger. Just wanted to let you know that the doctors are tapering off the medications and expect Joy to come around within the next 24 hours. "It seems like it's coming soon, doesn't it?" "I remember the doctor saying that they plan to keep her in a coma for at least a week." "Well, I think they were encouraged by the results of some tests. Have you thought about letting her explain everything and forgiving her?" "No. In fact, I keep finding more and more deception. There is no coming back from this," I said. Then I filled him in on everything I had found, with the exception of the secret bank account. He wasn't too pleased when I named his daughter's secret lover. There was disappointment, devastation, and disgust in his voice as he hung up. I didn't tell him how I planned to repay Joy for deceiving her. I had just made coffee when Steven came in through the back door. "You'll never believe it," he said. Then he suddenly exclaimed, "About coffee? Good morning, Steve. Don't you think Joe will find it strange that you're at my house at 8 in the morning and he's at work?" "You're just teasing him and he knows it," he said, as I barely stopped myself from spilling my coffee everywhere with laughter. "You said that I would never believe what?" I asked, handing him a cup of coffee. He was right. When I looked at what he found, it seemed to me that I had fallen into some strange hole. And when he explained all this to me, I suddenly saw everything completely clearly. When Joy went to Garrett's funeral, she only half lied. She could say that she was going to Jimenez, and it would be 100% true. She went to Fiona's funeral. It was Fiona who died in a car accident in Laramie, and I'll bet my last cent that she accompanied Garrett there, and that was the beginning of the affair. The following information angered me even more. The year before, when Joy called me to join her in Miami, Garrett was in jail. He was serving a 10-month sentence for petty theft. He served 10 months and then had to serve 4 years on parole. His parole agreement prohibited him from leaving Colorado, so I assumed that if I asked Cal, he would tell him that Joy had insisted on more local sex trips. Until his arrest, Garrett worked for a software development company, but the funny thing is that companies related to national defense cannot have criminals on staff. I wondered if the police would catch him before he realized his gravy boat was empty. Later that day, I called my lawyer and told him my plan. He laughed and said that he could arrange everything, and everything would be legal. Now, all I could do was wait for Joy to come to her senses. 2 weeks after finally emerging from her coma, Joy was allowed to be questioned by the police. I walked down the hallway behind Detective Phillips and Detective Albert. They came from Vale to interrogate Joy. Garrett was arrested when he tried to intimidate a bank employee into giving him money that he believed should be in his bank account. When they read the card designed on Joy Riggs, the cashier's alarm bells are ringing. She went to ask the manager, who confirmed that the card had been reported stolen. Bank security held him until Denver police came to pick him up. When he was detained, it was discovered that he was wanted for questioning in Vale. His parole officer seemed interested in his leaving Denver without his approval. Denver was more than happy to provide him with guest accommodations. I hoped that he would have a well-endowed cellmate. When Phillips and Albert entered Joy's room, I remained in the hallway. Hugh was kind enough to talk them into letting me listen, and Detective Phillips asked if I had any questions I'd like to ask her. I had a million of them, but I decided that they would only ask one. They introduced themselves, and I heard Jim ask if they wanted him to close the door. Without missing a beat, she explained that since they weren't detaining Joy, they couldn't allow the door to be locked, but had posted a colleague outside the door to prevent eavesdropping. I was dressed in a suit and looked like a detective, so no one should have thought that I was out of place. At first, Joy seemed hesitant to answer their questions. She denied and denied until they drew her attention to the fact that the receptionist had placed her with two different men. One, of course, was Cal, and the other was Garrett. She eventually admitted that she had been with both men, but was embarrassed to admit that Garrett had beaten her. Then Phillips played a card I didn't see coming. I'm sure you already know that your husband believes that you have two different lovers without his knowledge. Whatever you tell us may be related to him, and when he sees the truth, it may push him to reconcile with you. Not a single chance for reconciliation, I thought, as Phillips spewed out her crap. Then everything came out. How she lied to me so she could accompany Garrett to his sister's funeral. I felt sorry for him, and I knew that Roger wouldn't want me to go to him, just like my father. I'm sorry, Dad. Anyway, that weekend we decided we still loved each other. The only problem was that I loved Roger, so Garrett suggested we secretly meet with him once a month. I didn't see how it could hurt Roger, so I agreed. Then she recounted everything Cal had told him about how it all started for them. Claimed that she was with Cal because she was turned on by the fact that they were both married. When they started going to meetings, and then more meetings, she decided to deal with Cal one week and Garrett the next. I was ashamed that Roger never went with me, so I gave him Miami. Lying bitch. If I had any regrets about serving her the way I intended to, this lie simply took them away from me. Her smugness really drove me crazy. Then, when she was questioned about the beating, she asked to be lenient with Garrett. I made him angry that night. Said I was stopping the pills so Roger and I could have kids. Garrett said I should give him an equal chance to impregnate me. I told him that Roger would never believe it was his baby if I let it happen. During the evening, he kept asking me to give him a chance to make me pregnant. When I asked him to stop it, he lost his temper. That's the last thing I remember before I woke up here and found out that Roger thought I cheated on him and left me. Her crying could have won an Oscar if she weren't such a cruel, calculating piece of trash. Phillips finally hammered in the final nail and confirmed what I had suspected ever since I saw her secret letter. So, on a personal note, can I ask why you have Jiminy Cricket tattooed on your thigh? It was Garrett's idea. He said that this way he could be with me all the time, and Roger wouldn't know anything. At that moment, I entered the room. She had the nerve to call me baby. Hey, baby, I'm really sorry, but if I may explain... I handed her a stack of papers in my hand and said, No need. By the way, you've already been served. I heard her scream as I left the room and went on to the rest of my life. 5 years have passed. Everyone knows that a phone ringing in the middle of the night is not a good sign. For me, it became part of the job. I conducted the conversation, received the necessary information, and left. I rolled over and kissed my sleeping wife on the forehead. Then, as had become customary, I went lower and kissed her swollen belly. I knew she wasn't completely asleep when I smelled her arousal. You better be careful not to start something you can't finish, she said sleepily. Even before pregnancy, I could excite her by kissing her belly. I was looking forward to becoming a father. Sorry, baby. Just kissing Charlie Brown goodbye. She giggled. Really, Zeke? We haven't even chosen his real name and you've already given him a nickname? I laughed, then got up and got dressed. I've thought of him as Charlie Brown ever since I found out he was a boy. Something on the sonogram looked like a Charlie Brown shirt, and that thought stuck in my head. Have a nice day, baby, I said to my sleeping wife as I headed out. She muttered something in response. I knew her day would be less hectic since she was taking maternity leave and D-Day was a month away. 30 minutes later, I arrived at the crime scene. I may not have been in this particular trailer before, but I've been in many like it during my time on patrol. The results no longer surprised me. 5 years ago, I divorced my wife, Joy. I thought that the divorce would be clean, without any nonsense, but it turned out that I was deeply mistaken. After I refused to talk to her and listen, Jim hired a lawyer for her. When my lawyer received the financial forms from her, I noticed that she did not include her secret account. For weeks, I wondered how she funded this secret account. One day, I unexpectedly ran into Cal Davis. At first, he tried to dodge me, but in the end, I insisted on my own. I said that I had no animosity towards him and invited him to dinner. Over lunch, he told me a lot of interesting things. It turned out that the salary that Joy was transferring into our joint account was commissions from the sales of her and her 3 interns. Her bonus checks and commissions she received from people renewing policies went into a secret account. He himself opened a separate account only for the renewal of policies. As a bonus, he was able to provide me with all of her information. I saw how many bonuses and extensions she earned. After calling our accountant and receiving information from the IRS, from an anonymous hacker who also called me a big jerk when I told him about the career change, I discovered that Joy had earned over $120,000 in unreported income over a 6-year period. I transferred just over $30,000 into our joint account after discovering this. She didn't know that I knew about the bill and was going to screw me. I suggested she split our account 50-50 and we each keep our assets. She responded by offering 75% of our total bill because she was being nice and not asking for half of the house I inherited while we were married. My lawyer argued that since she owned the house, she had nothing to lose from my inheritance. In the end, we agreed to split the joint account 50-50 and she would get 50% of my business. I hastily signed this agreement, and we entered it into the court system. They wrote me a check for exactly half of our total bill, plus 50 cents. I sold my share of the masonry business back to my uncle for the same dollar I paid him for it. Since the instruments belonged to me before marriage, she could not touch them. After selling the business, I went to college, completed the requirements for a criminal justice degree, and went to work for the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. My lawyer knew about my every move and made sure that I did everything legally. I even got my uncle to write me a receipt for $1. My lawyer said Joy had a grin on her face when she received the check. I'm sure that smirk quickly disappeared when she discovered her secret account had been looted. My accountant did some creative bookkeeping, and we showed that all the money in the joint account came from Joy's insurance and my business. I paid all taxes on them and was free and clean. Joy never found out that she paid for my education. An anonymous call to the IRS, along with some evidence, led to Joy being audited. Yes, I was checked as collateral damage, but I was clean. Joy ended up serving 6 months for tax evasion, and in a fun twist that was funny to me, Garrett was accused of stealing all her money. He had her bank card, so the law, not eager to exonerate a loser like him, didn't do much investigating, and his dime store public defender couldn't do anything to make him look innocent to his colleagues. After being convicted of assaulting Joy, having his probation revoked, and being charged with theft, Garrett Jiminy Cricket. Jimenez was sentenced to spend the next 35 years in prison. Katrina divorced Cal, and from what I heard, he moved to Utah to start his life over. When Joy got out of prison, she got a job at a telemarketing firm. When she was in prison, I received an unpleasant letter from her. She accused me of ruining our marriage and deceiving her and Garrett out of jealousy. I threw the letter away and moved on with my life. When I told my buddy Paul about the letter, he said I should have done like the guys in internet stories and sold her ass to a Mexican brothel. I replied that she would not receive such a punishment because she would like it. I spent my first 3 years in the sheriff's department in a patrol car. While CSPD receives most of the worst cases, such as burglaries, murders, and drug offenders, we have more domestic violence cases. The only time I pulled out my service weapon was to point it at my wife, who threatened me with a knife because I arrested her husband after he beat her. That was a year and 6 months ago. I've been working as a detective for a little over a year. To this day, I cannot understand why a woman returns to a man who beats her. I understand this less when I walk into the trailer and see a woman who has clearly been beaten to death, lying among a pile of empty beer bottles. Forensic experts have already taken all the fingerprints and took photographs of the crime scene. I knew that by the end of the day, I would have my husband's name, and we would begin the official search for him. The woman's boyfriend or lover was in the bedroom with a fractured skull. Everything would be simple. Either she cheated and hubby did it, or the old lover took revenge on her and her new beau. I'll spend most of the morning reviewing old patrol reports and talking to officers who have visited this trailer before. I knew the upside to this case was that I would get less crap from my boss for losing a detective indefinitely. I had been working for the police for a year and a half when a new detective was transferred to me. All I heard from Hugh was that the guy came from somewhere in the north. One evening, when I was not on duty, they had a party at the bar next to our substation. I was actually shocked when I walked in and saw Desiree Phillips at the table. We talked for quite a while that evening, and I know 3 or 4 detectives were upset that the patrol cop was harassing the new detective, but I think we had our own story. I didn't pester her because I assumed she was married. We became friends, and even after learning that she was single, I still didn't try anything. I was disappointed in the relationship. We went to dinner and a movie. I never considered it dating. He always dropped her off at her apartment, like a gentleman, and then went home and watched adult videos on the internet. One evening, after she had finished a particularly difficult task, I took her to a bar. I stayed mostly sober to ensure her safety. At the end of the evening, I took her home and escorted her to her apartment. I asked if she was okay, and she asked me to help her take off her shoes. I helped her take off her boots, then got ready to leave. "Oh, Zeke, is there anything else?" I turned to see what she wanted and was caught in a strong hug. "She's drunk, you fucking idiot. She's vulnerable, and she's your fucking best friend whose name isn't Paul. She'll eventually hate you if you don't stop this now." I pulled away, and suddenly she didn't seem so drunk anymore. "What's wrong with me, Zeke? Why don't you even seem to want to touch me?" First, you're drunk. I don't want to be part of a drunken memory that will ruin our friendship. Second, I just don't know if I'm ready. Understand, this stupid cheater fucked you so much that now all women are evil. Did you enjoy kissing me? Of course I liked it. You are one of the sexiest. Before I had time to say a word, she said, "Come with me. I'm not drunk, and I'm not a woman of easy virtue. I've been with 4 guys in my entire life, and you know all the stories." She later admitted that she liked me from the first minute we met in Vale. She never dreamed that I would work in the police when she transferred, and took it as a sign. She was just tired of Vale, and it just so happened that 2 of our detectives got jobs in Denver. That night was the first of many times we slept together. A year later we got married, and a month later we became parents. My boss hated the fact that she would need maternity leave and hounded me at every opportunity for knocking her up. I used to tell Hugh that Nora could become his godmother, but he would be disowned. He's also not too happy about me taking a month off from childcare to enjoy my son. And as a bonus, Desiree loves films about World War II. Life is good, and I hope Piper will be okay with living with her mom and dad. Something tells me this will happen. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.